Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 160 of the Note Coach podcast. I'm going for 365 in a row. I'm nearly halfway there. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg, joined today by Onnie Michalsky.
Yeah, you said it right.
I said it right. And we're going to be chatting about how to quiet your inner mean girl. Or boy, I suppose, because we do have both gender listeners, that inner critic, that voice that we have. And before we get into it, what comes to mind as you're listening to this, if you're driving or walking, when you think about your own inner mean girl, boy, person? So we tend to be hardest on ourselves, and we don't even catch it most of the time. It's just kind of like I think of it. When you watch TV, is it called a ticker tape that runs underneath and has like the little announcements? It's kind of like that, constantly going. Like my little ticker tape's going, you're rambling, you're not making any sense. So, I'm excited that this is Onnie's jam. So where would you like to start?
So I'm going to start with answering that question. When I think of inner mean girl, the reason that I chose that term is because of Regina George. Like the mean girl
Mean Girls.
from Mean Girls, right? Like she is the one that is just, constantly in our head. We are our own worst critic. We tend to be, so hard on ourselves. And I'm all about like self-care, self-compassion, learning how to treat ourselves, as worthy as, because we matter. But yet we have this inner voice that continues to keep us playing small. And so, so my background is cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a therapist, and that's my main modality. In cognitive behavioral therapy, what that is we do a lot of looking at the thoughts and the behaviors that drive us, and then learning to challenge them and shift them. Because once we start doing that, then our life starts changing, and of course, I use it in the treatment of depression and anxiety and other mental health disorders. But it really comes down to like reframing and shifting our perspective and being able to say things differently to ourselves, to our changing our thoughts. And so I broaden that out. I work with moms. So we do talk a lot about that inner mean girl and what we're telling ourselves, because words matter. And what we're telling ourselves is going to dictate what we do and the mark that we make in the world.
I
and
love
so
that.
We need to kind of like that saying, you get more flies with honey, right? Like,
you catch more flies with honey, or bees with sugar, or that kind of thing.
So it's something like that, right? I don't even know. Maybe I should learn.
So my question is, where my curiosity goes is, how would someone know when that was something they wanted to address? Like we all have thoughts, we all think things and go through our mind, but when would it be a time where it was like, actually, this is something that's becoming enough that I should address this or work on this?
Right. Well, I mean, I think so many of us are living on autopilot that we don't even stop to reflect on what we're thinking, but yet our thoughts are driving our emotions, like what we feel, and our behaviors, which is what we do. And so if you're finding that you're not feeling like you want to be feeling, or you're engaging in behaviors that you don't want to be engaging in, that may be the time where you're like, okay, you know what, there's something. Like, we can't control our feelings. We can control our thoughts though. And that's something that, when you think that the situation is completely out of our control, it may be, but the reaction or the response that you have to that situation is everything. Like, perspective is everything.
What comes to mind when you say that is there's a story, a fable, whatever you want to call it. Have you heard about the grandfather who takes his two grandsons to the barn? Have you heard this one? So basically, he takes them, I don't know if they're hired in Airbnb, I don't know the context of this, but takes two grandchildren to the barn, and they walk inside, and there's like manure everywhere. Like, it stinks. And the first grandson just barges out of there. It's like, it stinks. I cannot be in here. Like, this situation's no. And the other grandson is swinging from beam to beam to beam. And the grandfather's like, what are you doing? He's like, with all this shit here, there must be a pony. So the situation is exactly the same.
Yes.
thoughts is like, this is stinking and I'm unbearable, I'm leaving. And the other one's like, where's the pony?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Like, that's why, like, even like, there's two sides to every story, because the same thing, like two people are going to come at the same exact situation and have completely different responses, because they've had different experiences in their life. They've had different beliefs. They've formed different beliefs based on the things that they've experienced or the things that they've witnessed through their life. And so that's going to determine which, whether they are leaving the barn or flying
from beam to beam looking for a pony. But also it makes me think of the other fable about the twins, like twin brothers who brought up with a drunken father, and one becomes a drunk themselves and the other becomes like really successful, and they both say on interview, with the upbringing I had, how could I be any different? And they had the same upbringing, and one was like, I'm going to follow exactly how I was mirrored, and the other is like, I've had this and I want to take the lessons and go a different way. So I think that what's powerful about, how to quiet your inner mean girl, boy, child, I don't want to be not inclusive here, but it's kind of like we're responsible, we're the problem, but we're also the solution. And I just thinking, at the time of recording is the school holidays here in Australia, and yesterday it was a hard day. Like, I was having a hard personal day, and I did find myself in some pretty stinking thinking, and I was like, everything sucks. And then I was like, I'm the only one who can give my children a happy mother. Like, I am the only one. It's not their fault. It's not my husband's fault. It's not school's fault. It's not the society's fault. I was really in one of those moments where, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Like, where's this village? Like, do they just show up?
Where are they? When are they coming?
Yeah. So, like, if someone's coming to you and they're like, okay, I've noticed my thoughts aren't, I don't know how they'd describe that, because, you have to be quite self-aware to, like, my thoughts aren't in service. It's very coach speaky. But for anyone listening, what kind of things may they be thinking that then know that needs addressing? That's a terrible question. I'm hoping you can follow me
here. No, but I know what you mean. Okay, so like, if you're experiencing self-doubts, like maybe it's something like you want to do, like we were just talking about our businesses, right? Like maybe it's you're thinking about starting a business, you have an idea, but you are struggling with having that confidence to actually start it, to do something. Like the self-doubts, you're constantly like, but I can't do it. I can't, all of those negative thoughts are coming up, and those self-doubts, and you're finding like you're talking yourself out of actually doing something that you want to do. You're thinking of like giving up a dream or an idea that you may have. That may be a time where you're like, maybe it's the thoughts that I'm having. Maybe it's because you're right. It does take great self-awareness. And that's one of the things we talk about is, one, you're going to have to be practicing grace and self-compassion throughout this entire process, because it's a practice. It's not something like, you're not going to come to this moment and be like, oh, this is what I'm feeling. These are the thoughts that I'm having, and this is how I'm going to reframe it. That doesn't happen. Like, that's not realistic. And so first, giving yourself some moments in your day, it could be just 5 minutes at the end of the day, to reflect back and say, what's going on in my mind? I work with super moms, they're so super busy that they don't give themselves time to even hear their thoughts, like to even like sit and reflect on their thoughts. And so that's one of the first things that I suggest, is to give yourself a moment during the day, typically at night, use those bookends, the early morning and the late at night, to just say, what happened today? Was there something like, did you notice a mood shift? Did you notice something like, did something happen that you felt like off about, or you felt like it put you in a bad mood? Like, what was that situation? And then kind of laying it out, which I'm going to give your listeners a actual template that's going to help them be able to walk through this process. So asking yourself, how do I feel, right? Like, practice some mindfulness where you check in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? Or how did I feel in that situation? Again, it's something that you probably want to do after the moment, especially when you're just starting. How was I feeling? What kind of thoughts would have led me to feel that way? Sometimes we're aiming not to feel, some things are actually sad. And that's another thing, like, or actually like frustrating or discouraging. Like, it's okay to feel that way. And again, that's giving yourself some self-compassion and saying like, it's okay to feel sad about this. It's totally rational. Like it feels, and letting yourself like acknowledge that
Yes.
feeling
I'm just going to
instead of
interrupt you
pushing it
there
away.
because there's something I want to say to that. For me, that step, like this is Sue's, it might sound judgmental, I don't mean it that way, but it feels to me the dumbest, but it's the most powerful. So yesterday in this whole moment I was telling you about where I was having this like not breakdown, I don't want to go that severe, but I did something similar, but I can't wait for the resource and I'm going to download it too, as well as the listeners. But I realized that I felt disappointed. And for me, that is one of my hardest emotions to sit with. I can sit with anger. I can sit with fear. I don't like it. I don't like any of these big ones, but disappointment is the
They're
hardest.
uncomfortable.
And then, and then to say like, it's okay to feel disappointed. Like I literally said it out loud and it felt so dumb, but just to pause and to say it and to like, because I was thinking, if it wasn't me, if this was a child or a client or a friend who came to me, what would I say to them? And to do that to myself. Yes. And it was like, it is okay to feel disappointed. Doesn't mean I need to hang out and live here, but just to give it a breath rather than because it was coming out sideways at anger about something that was not even related to the thing.
Yeah.
So keep going.
So you just brought up a great like technique for getting yourself to get at those thoughts, like, or to reframe those thoughts is, what would you say to a loved one? Because again, we are our worst critic. And so to get yourself out of that, like get yourself out of the pattern is say like, what would I tell a loved one or a best friend who was struggling with this? Like, what advice would I give? Or like, what kind of comfort would I provide him or her? And bringing that back in to be able to give that to yourself. Like that's an awesome thing to be able to do. And that's one of the strategies to be able to reframe. And so you're looking at like, what are the thoughts that would have made me feel frustrated or disappointed or angry? Like, what are those, what could I have been thinking? Because a lot of times, again, we're running on autopilot. We have these thoughts and they happen so quickly, right? They're these automatic negative thoughts that happen so quickly that we don't even realize that we even had them. Like we're feeling the feelings and we're like, and so practicing some mindfulness techniques is going to create some distance between the thought and the emotion so that you'll be able to better get at it and just take a guess, right? Like, what was that thought? What could have been the thought?
Oh, I can offer that for anyone because I always find a worked example better. So something I had worked on hadn't yielded the result I hoped for. So that was okay. That wasn't but where I went was it's never gonna work. Like the extreme, like because in this moment something didn't happen forevermore, and then from it's never gonna work. I'm a failure, not this thing. Like just distancing myself. This didn't turn out how I hoped is so much different than I'm a failure.
Yes. You're like taking just like we do with our kids, for all of you parents out there, like we need to attach that to the behavior or to the action and not to the child, right? Same thing for us. Like, because otherwise you're creating shame, like saying I am a failure, like rather than acknowledging your humanness and saying it's a mistake or hey, I'll figure it out. Like shifting that the way you're talking to yourself in a way that is going to be much more kinder.
Yes.
And so, and just what you just said about that, I'm never going to get it. Like that could be a thinking distortion or a cognitive distortion that's playing a role in our thought. And there are lots of them. There's all or nothing thinking where like you're just, always, never, using those words, those black and white words and not looking at the gray area. There is mental filtering, where we tend to just filter out or disqualify anything positive about the situation. Ooh. And we zone in on the negative. And that's all we can see. We kind of put our blinders on and then we just discount anything else. There's the shoulds, right? Like shoulding all over yourself.
100%.
Saying, getting stuck in the compare game. and saying, I should be able to do this because I saw this person on Instagram be able to do it, right?
Yeah, and just to interrupt that there, this person on Instagram who probably you don't see all the prepping stuff in the background, and it's been edited, and they might have trained for years for this. So we're going to go on a tangent. So I want to wrap this episode up and do another one going into these things because this is great. But for now, Onnie, let the listeners know what you do and where they can find you and this resource that you've mentioned.
Sure. So like I mentioned, I'm a therapist, but I'm also a life and wellness coach. Moms Without Capes is my business. So you can find me. I have a podcast, the Moms Without Capes podcast, where I'm all about helping moms rediscover themselves under their mom hat. So if you've lost yourself in thinking that you have to do all of the things, then come listen to my podcast, come join my community. We've got lots of events and we're all about helping you reclaim your sense of self.
I love that. And for any Aussie listeners, Onnie is from overseas. So the mums is MOM, not MUM, how we spell it. I just, because I don't do show notes, people. So Mums Without Capes, MOMS.
Mom, yes.
So and where can they find the resource that you mentioned, please, Onnie?
Sure. So go to momswithoutcapes.com/nope, and you'll be able to find the template.
We would call that / in Australia because, we do everything the opposite way. So if you can't find it at all, just send me an email and I will forward it through to you. But thank you so much for joining us today, Onnie. And we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Yes, absolutely.